On the brink of death, King Robert Baratheon lay in his bed after the boar attack. The court murmured in the corridors, hoping that the gods would take the monarch away at any moment. Against this backdrop of uncertainty, Ned Stark took over as protector of the realm, backed by a will that avoided mentioning Joffrey as heir. Ned, faithful to the sense of justice that guided his life, understood that the whole mystery of Jon Arryn's death and everything that followed was extremely suspicious, so he decided to investigate the lineage of the Queen's children. After gathering enough evidence, he discovered that none of them was Robert's legitimate son, but the fruit of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister. Ned, still believing that the truth would be enough to restore order, sought out Cersei for a final warning. He told her to flee with her children before Robert discovered the truth, as his fury would be relentless. Cersei, overcome with pride and fear, refused to flee, believing that she could control events. Ned, however, didn't hesitate. He decided to act immediately and expose the betrayal of the crown. But before he could speak to Robert, he was attacked. Cersei, acting quickly, ordered Ned's arrest and summoned loyal guard from House Lannister. The betrayal was brutal and took place in the darkest corridors of the palace itself. In the middle of the night, he was ambushed by 5 armed men who had taken the other northern guards by surprise. Even though he was alone, he fought bravely. He killed 2 of the attackers and wounded a third before being mortally wounded in the back. Ned's blood stained the marble of the castle, and his death echoed like thunder through the halls of the Red Keep. Cersei believed that, with his death, she had eliminated the last threat to Joffrey's rise. However, she underestimated the strength of a wounded but living king. Robert recovered against all expectations, but when he discovered that Ned had been killed inside the castle in a treacherous coup, his fury was uncontrollable. The king, still weak, threw objects, shouted orders, and demanded that the murderers be brought to him. His pain was twofold. He had lost a loyal friend and discovered that his own house was infested with snakes. The people of King's Landing soon noticed the change in the air. Nobles feared an imminent war, while the common folk spoke of omens and curses. Ned Stark's death had shaken the foundations of the kingdom. Cersei thought her secret would never get out now that Ned was dead, but she discovered something that panicked her. A sealed letter, intended for Stannis Baratheon, had been left in her chambers without any further identification. In this copy, Ned detailed the truth about Joffrey's lineage and warned of the Queen's betrayal should the worst happen and Robert die. Panicked, she realized that someone knew about the letter and was blackmailing her. The Queen could no longer sleep or eat peacefully, fearing that her lie would come to light in front of the whole kingdom. Seeking protection, Cersei turned to Jaime Lannister. However, his connection to Ned's death because of the previous fight he had with the Stark made him the biggest suspect. Robert, blinded by rage and thirsty for justice, ordered Jaime's arrest, despite the Queen's protests. The kingdom was on the brink of civil war, and Tywin Lannister, on hearing of his son's arrest, began military movements on Casterly Rock. Meanwhile, Tyrion remained trapped in the north, unable to help his family. The storm had only just begun. Ned Stark's letters were not just words written in the wind. Cersei received copies of his accusation day after day, each one reinforcing the secret she had sworn to hide until death. No messenger was caught, no seal broken before it reached her hands, as if the gods themselves wanted the truth to be revealed. Each letter seemed to echo her imminent downfall. The Queen, increasingly uneasy, began to suspect the members of the small council, especially those who maintained a network of spies inside the Red Keep. To her, Varys' eyes and ears now seemed to be turned against her own crown, but she couldn't help thinking of Littlefinger as someone who could profit greatly from blackmailing her. And of course, she couldn't leave Maester Pycelle himself out of her suspicions. Cersei tried to use her own informants, but they came up empty. The corridors whispered names, but no one dared say who was behind the copies. Meanwhile, Robert, consumed by grief and fury, convened a royal council every day, demanding explanations. He decreed that if the culprit for Ned's death didn't appear within 7 days, Jaime would be executed. Political justification or polite manipulation was no longer enough. The threat was clear. If necessary, the king would order the execution of everyone present. Chaos and fear gripped King's Landing. Cersei, now desperate, thought of fleeing with her children, but it was too late. On the 5th day of Robert's ultimatum, the royal guard entered her chambers. She was dragged to the Iron Throne, where Robert awaited her with eyes of fire and Varys, the Master of Whispers, on his right. Cersei understood there that her fate had been sealed. She tried to resist, shouting that she was innocent, but Robert ordered her to be silent, his voice echoing throughout the hall. The Queen's mask was beginning to fall in front of everyone. Robert, trembling with rage, his stomach still wounded, held up a letter in front of the court. It was the original copy of Ned's letter, sealed and signed, with precise accusations and details of the lineage of the Baratheons and Lannisters. He called his sons into the room and ordered them to stand before him while he read the words that would forever stain his honor. The room fell silent. The children's eyes filled with fear and confusion. Cersei tried to run to them, but was restrained by the guards. The tension in the air was as thick as the stones of the walls that surrounded them. With each paragraph read, the shame and despair grew inside Cersei. She still tried to deny it, crying, pleading that it was all just a lie from a dead man. But it was no use. The horror of seeing her children looking at her, not understanding, not knowing what was true or not, made her lose control. In a fit of rage, she screamed. She shouted that it was all true, that she had lain with Jaime, that the 3 children were his, and that Robert had never been man enough to realize it. A deathly silence fell over everyone present. With clenched fists and watery eyes, Robert stared at her, but said nothing. Cersei continued, blinded by rage, spitting out every word like poison. She said that Robert was a drunkard, a pig that she put up with only because she had no choice, that he had never satisfied her as a woman, and that Jaime was the only man worthy of sharing her bed. He spoke with contempt, with years of bitterness finally poured out in front of the throne he had sworn to protect. Joffrey fell to his knees, weeping silently. Tommen trembled. Myrcella covered her face, unable to bear it. It was then that Varys, always serene, took the floor. He said that his little birds had discovered something darker. 2 soldiers from a Lannister guard had mysteriously disappeared shortly after Ned's death. A third was seriously wounded, with no convincing explanation. This soldier, said Varys, was the same man who had been hit by Ned's sword before his fall. His story was key to proving treason, and by order of the king, he had been captured and taken to the dungeons for interrogation. Under torture and fear, the soldier finally confessed. He said that Cersei had ordered the ambush on Ned Stark, fearing that he would reveal the truth before he could be silenced. The ambush was not an act to protect the realm, but to protect the secret of the illegitimate children. The guards, at the Queen's behest, acted as assassins within the Red Keep itself. It was a complete betrayal, not just of Robert's honor, but of the throne itself. The soldiers' words sealed Cersei's fate. The order was immediate. Cersei Lannister was led away in chains, screaming and cursing everyone around her. Robert ordered that she be imprisoned in the highest tower of the Red Keep, under constant surveillance. Her children, now tainted by the truth revealed, were placed in custody until the king decided what to do. Jaime was still in prison, awaiting trial. Tywin, learning of his daughter's fall and his son's imprisonment, became increasingly powerful and no longer had the patience for negotiations. Cersei Lannister's trial was heralded throughout the kingdom as an act of justice, but most knew it was nothing more than revenge. In the public square, under the gaze of nobles, commoners, and silent enemies, she was formally accused of treason against the king and the crown. Robert ordered her execution at dawn, as an example to any other traitor who dared to challenge the Iron Throne. Jaime was informed of his sister lover's fate and, even in chains, cried out for her, begging for mercy. But Robert would not give in. His kingdom was bleeding, and only a show of force could prevent a greater rebellion. Jaime was executed the next day. When Tywin Lannister heard of his son's execution, he immediately gathered his armies. He considered it not only an affront, but a direct blow to the honor of House Lannister. He declared war on the crown, threatening King's Landing with the full force of Casterly Rock. However, Robert was no longer alone. The North, with the remnants of the Starks, joined him, and the Martells, hearing that the Lannisters had proclaimed themselves against the crown, sent their forces, led by Oberyn Martell himself. The weight of the alliance was brutal. The war was swift and merciless. None of the great houses wanted to ally themselves with the Lannisters after Cersei and Jaime's betrayal came to light. Tywin tried to negotiate, to write letters, to promise riches, but no one responded. His forces were outnumbered every day by his enemies. One day, while he slept, Dorne, the North and the South attacked with precision. The forces of Casterly Rock were crushed. Tywin's humiliation was complete. Oberyn had the most to gain from the siege. During the final confrontation, he himself confronted Gregor Clegane and made him confess to his crimes against his sister and nephews. Robb Stark was not proclaimed king in the North, as Robert apologized for Ned's death and returned Arya and Sansa safely to their family. Tywin Lannister, knowing that all was lost for his war against the crown, surrendered before Oberyn took his life. It took 10 soldiers to get Oberyn to stop trying to drive his spear into the Lannister leader's stomach. Tywin ended up asking only for the lives of his grandchildren as the price for peace. Robert agreed, but imposed a high price on the Old Lion. Tywin was stripped of all his titles and possessions and sent to the Wall, exiled to serve the Night's Watch until the end of his days. Robert refused to kill Cersei's children. Despite the betrayal, they were children who had been raised as his own. Joffrey, old enough to wield a sword, was sent with his grandfather to the Watch and deprived of any rights. Tommen, because he was too young, and Myrcella, because she was innocent of everything, were spared. Robert publicly declared that he would not be so cruel as to take their lives. At the end of it all, only Tyrion Lannister remained among the adults in the house. Intelligent and cautious, he stood before the king with proof of his innocence. When Bran Stark finally woke up and revealed that Jaime Lannister had pushed him from the tower, Tyrion's suspicions were dispelled. He became the new Lord of Casterly Rock and took responsibility for his nephews. Tommen and Myrcella came to live under his protection, while Joffrey and Tywin languished in the darkness of the Wall. Joffrey and Tywin were serving in the Night Watch and braving the cold of the far north. They heard the whispers about the White Walkers and how the wildlings were naming a new king beyond the Wall. But before they could learn more about what was to come, they went to welcome the new members who would be joining the Ravens. Tywin's eyes widened when he saw that one of the new members was none other than Oberyn Martell. His direct gaze and troubled smile towards the Old Lion only hinted at the old commander's demise.